And I remember hearing my dad when I was growing up, as I do today, because thank God my dad and I, my parents and I, talk to each other so often that we always have a recent memory of a recent conversation. But I think about the fact that when we think about our past and we think about our parents' voice in our past, there are certain words and certain phrases that we remember. And we think about it as parents of young kids, what that we do and say will they quote back to us one day? Sometimes it's those things that as kids make us cringe. Those phrases we go, oh, not that joke again. And then later in life, we laugh at the same joke as we hear ourselves telling the same silly pun to our kids. And I remember in my household when Dad would say, it's hot. There were about 3 beats, and Dad would say, it's because of the heat. Just what we grew up with. It's part of the torture of our lives. But I remember one of the things that my dad used to say that meant something then but means more now is, I learn quickly, you just have to teach me slowly. I learn quickly, you just have to teach me slowly. I said it to a golf instructor the other day. I said, I learn quickly, you just have to teach me slowly. And I think in a way we're here year after year after year on the same appointed dates because we learn quickly, but boy, do we have to be taught slowly. We come back to the same rituals, the same wise words, the same prayers, the same talits that we wrap around our shoulders. And we say, why couldn't they teach me last year what I'm learning this year or what I hope to learn? Because we learn quickly, but we have to be taught slowly. It's part of our design. We learn quickly, but we have to be taught slowly, maybe, as I said earlier, because our assumption is always that the wiser the word, more sure we are that it's really meant for the person next to us or behind us. That we nudge the person next to us and say, I really hope this year she hears this. Instead of thinking, I really hope this year that I stop that voice and listen to the voice that's speaking through Torah, through our prayer book, through perhaps a wise word or a wise song or prayer or even in silence, that maybe the greatest wisdom is telling me sometimes to be quiet and to listen. I learn quickly, but I have to be taught slowly that maybe one of the gifts that I get from being here is that I realize I'm a part of you and you're a part of me. And I raise my kids here to realize not only that they come into a community once a year or once a month, but that they're part of a community all year round of people who know who they are because they make themselves known to them, of people who care about their lives and their stories. And what I want to inculcate in my kids is a sense of care for this family, for their family. So that when they grow up, they'll say, I didn't grow in a town where there were some Jews. They'll say, I grew up in a community where we celebrated Jewish life. My parents didn't bring me in and out of it so that I'd have occasional stamps in my passport of life. Instead, they said, reside in this place because it's wise. Reside in this Jewish place because it's rich. Reside in this Jewish place because it's ancient and it had something modern to teach you about who you are in this age and this day of your life, so that they too can learn quickly while learning slowly. The rabbis say, and it's interesting to think about what the rabbis say. They say that the purpose of all 613 mitzvot of the Torah and Talmud, the purpose of all of those 613 laws is one thing, one task, letzaref et habriot. And the words mean to refine the beings, our beings, to refine our souls. The purpose of the entire Torah, they're telling us, the purpose of these holy days and those holy days, some of which we missed and some of which we lit candles for. The purpose of the light that we add to one another's lives is to reinvigorate and find what it is not only to have a body that gives us so many concerns, but to have a mind and a soul that should concern us, so that we become people who are concerned with the growth of their souls. We live in a world where we see the growth of body, and we see the realization that muscles can be charged with more strength because we give them more weight, but nothing other than our tradition teaches us that we have muscles that are infinitely more vital and important, that rectify our world and that are our souls. Our tradition teaches us to work on our souls, to find time not only for the important and for the urgent, to find a time for silence, to find time to see who we are and where we are in this point in our journey. Abraham Joshua Heschel said so wisely, so beautifully in his book, The Shabbat, The Sabbath, one of the shortest, most beautiful books that I've ever read. He said, and I want to quote him accurately, he said, "We ignore the important at the cost of the urgent." We ignore the important at the cost of the urgent so often because we're involved in something important and then the urgent comes up and pulls us away. Because we're doing the important thing, we're sitting at a table, but then our phone rings and we assume it must be the lottery calling, even though we never bought a ticket. But we assume that our answer phone or our voicemail recorder that was so powerful, so well equipped, so capable the day before, at this moment, during that meal with our wife, our husband, our kids, our friends, it won't work. We have to take that call. We ignore the important at the cost, or I should say, at the cost of what seems in our mind, our ego's mind, to be the urgent. We make a statement like that to ourselves and to our kids and grandkids by being here. After all, it's Thursday. Thursday, our kids say, they assume we should be at work. We should be in an office. We should be doing something of productivity, especially in this year that's so challenging. It challenges everything outside us, everything that we hold. But our tradition says, come indoors and challenge what you are. What we do, the statement that we make to ourselves and to our community and to our kids, is we say we are going to place the important over the urgent, because sure, it's urgent to earn a living and to return those calls and those emails, but instead we're going to turn off those switches and lock those doors. We're going to put a suit or a dress, a talit around our shoulders, because we want to make a statement to you about what's important, what's everlasting, what is truth in our world and in our lives. We learn quickly, but we have to be taught slowly over years and years of a tradition that says walk gently and slowly into that next day, realizing that overnight successes are made on the backs of countless years that those people were unnoticed. What happened overnight, if we look to those people that are the overnight successes in the world, was light was shone, recognition was given to the work that they did quietly, silently, for countless days or years and years and years. As we read in the book Outliers, 10,000 hours it took before most of the greats became great. 10,000 hours when they were anonymous, before they became household names. The question is, when will we elevate our names by virtue of the hours that we put into who we might be? I learn quickly, but I have to be taught slowly, that I can change, but that I have to be patient with change. That if I think change is something that happens by virtue of sitting, having a ticket, and opening a book, then I haven't learned slowly the lessons of a tradition of thousands of years that say come back to that book over and over and over. And allow yourself to be changed, not merely by changing your feet, but by virtue of changing the direction. So that on this holiday, change simply a foot's direction. Don't yet imagine that you're making a new journey, just that you're changing your kavanah. You're changing your orientation to do something new. And then have patience and realize you'll come back here next year, realizing your gains, the steps that you made forward on a new path. What we call teshuvah, making a change in the direction, the course of our lives, which means making a change in the course of our being, which means making a change in the course of our doing, which means making a change in the course of other people's lives, because we don't live on an island. I remember that movie with Tom Hanks. I think it was called Castaway. I remember the volleyball. The volleyball was his devoted friend because he didn't have anybody else to impact. And we don't live with Tom Hanks, I don't think. We don't live on that island, and I think what it means is that if we live with other people, we have to realize that the greatest way, letzaref et habriot, to refine our souls, isn't by looking inward only. Look inward at these moments when you close your eyes and you look to who you are, but then open them to see the world around you. There's a great joke, a story, and it's about a man called Sheldon. It has to be a good story with a name like Sheldon. And Sheldon is a great guru. And Sheldon's mother comes to the base of a great mountain, maybe in Tibet, and she comes to all the disciples, everybody there, all the adherents who want to climb the mountain to have one moment with the great guru. And she comes to the bottom, she says, I want to come up and see the guru. And the disciples look at one another in their white robes, and they look to her and they say, with great respect, maybe it's such a difficult climb up that mountain to meet the guru. Maybe we should convey your message to him. She says, I want to see the guru. They say, okay. And they start climbing, and she labors, and she climbs with them, and finally, schwitzing, exhausted, she gets to the top of the mountain where all the disciples are gathered around the guru, who sits with his crossed legs and his hands clasped, fingers clasped, and his eyes closed. And they come to her and they ask, what would you like to ask the guru? And she says, Sheldon. And suddenly the guru's eyes open. And she says, when are you going to come home? I could tell you that the story of Sheldon is the story of so many Jews who left this tradition because they didn't see its wisdom, and maybe they thought that by closing their eyes they would find God. When our tradition said, by all means close them to blink, but then open them, because God needs you to see one another. God needs you to grow wise with one another. God needs you to refine that soul that you were given, that we say in our prayers every morning is pure, timimah. And we don't do it simply by immersing ourselves in prayer and meditation, by closing our eyes on tops of mountain. Instead, what we say to Sheldon is, come off the mountain and realize that in order to grow and refine your soul, you need to meet people, and they live in the valleys. We live in the valleys. People live in the valleys, and life occurs on the bottom. If you think about our Torah, if anything, our Torah is a journey off mountaintops back into where we live. Moses goes on top of a mountain, but a nation remains below. Imagine if the Torah wanted all of us to be on top of a mountain, all of us would have climbed to the top of Mount Sinai, and maybe one individual would have been left below. But instead, the Torah says, send that one man, because I need one man to climb. But I need him to make a journey back to all of you, so that all of you on the flatlands with the potholes can make a journey forward. I need you to be there because sometimes the wilderness will be wild and endangering. And I need you to strengthen one another. I need you to realize that sometimes it will be your strength alone that will carry somebody else forward over a journey of days and months and years. When someone sits Shiva, they shouldn't do it alone, because I need you to gather around them to say Kaddish with them. When somebody celebrates the bat mitzvah of their daughter or granddaughter, I need you to gather around them. Come down off that mountain, because they need to see that she belongs and you belong. They need to raise her up on a chair, but they need your strength, your arms, to give her the height that she needs to realize in that moment, so that it gives her the perspective that she might only find in that day of her life. I learn quickly, but I have to be taught slowly, that my devices can destroy me. I say Mi Chamocha every morning and every evening, reminding myself that in fact I'm free, but then I look down to something that Steve Jobs gave me, and in fact I realize I'm enslaved. I give him as much time as I give my own kids on some days. And what I realized maybe a month ago was that, with all respect to my iPhone, as wonderful as it is, we have to start divorce proceedings. Because we can't live together the way we have been. We're being disruptive to one another's sacred lives. And so what I realized weeks ago was, I need to know when to turn it off, and I need to know when to leave it to be silent, so that I can hear a whole conversation, hear a whole thought. I remember the radio commentator Dennis Prager years ago saying something. Braun and I turned it on for a moment and heard some words that were so profound. He was talking about parenting, not about politics, about parenting. And he said, what we need to give our kids isn't quality time, it's quantity time. And if you're a parent, you realize that it isn't taking them to the Dodger game that makes a childhood or makes us parents. It's being there in those moments long enough so that we can count moments, sometimes of silence, sometimes that seem to be empty and unnecessary, because we can't predict when our child will have to, that question that he or she needs to ask us. We can't predict when we'll model some behavior that won't come in moments that we design to be quality, but moments that God gives us of quantity. I want to share a poem with you. It's brief. It's so brief and so beautiful and so profound. And on the assumption that you, like me, learn slowly, or I should say learn quickly but need to be taught slowly, I'll say it once now and once again afterwards. The story, the poem, is called simply An Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters, and it's by Portia Nelson. She was a cabaret singer in the 1970s. And I don't know that she did anything, I don't know her voice, I don't know her cabaret singing, but I don't know that she did anything impactful as these words that you'll now hear. Her autobiography in 5 short chapters, which after you hear it, might become your autobiography in any number of chapters. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes me forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. The English have an expression. They say, when the penny drops. It means when you get an idea. You may have heard it 1,000 times because we learn quickly, but have to be taught slowly. And I think it's based on those red telephone boxes that you'd see, usually in the rain, on an English road. And you'd go inside and you'd put a coin in and you'd dial your number, and the penny literally wouldn't drop into the base of the telephone until the connection was made. So those aha moments, those epiphanies, when we say, I've heard it so many times. I've read page 14 about growing slowly like the oak tree in this prayer book over and over and over again. The penny doesn't drop until the year 2012 when suddenly we go, aha, it's my story. We read Portia Nelson's story, and I think about us, and I realize that every one of us goes down those roads and sees the potholes. At first, we don't realize them. That's our immaturity. And then we realize them. That's our maturity. And then our true wisdom and heroism is when we actually realize that we need to change course in our lives. Le kaven, to change the direction of where we're going. Do you remember the movie Jerry Maguire? There was that fabulous quote. The quote, if I remember it correctly, was Dorothy. It was Renee Zellweger. The wonderful Renee Zellweger. And she says about him at one point, she says, I love the man that he almost is. I looked it up on Google because I wanted to make sure that I got the quote right. Give a guess of how many Google sites contain that quote from Jerry Maguire. 20,000, 4,000, 180,000 sites hold that quote because so many people found it wise. I love the man that he almost is. Our tradition says that God loves the man and woman that we almost are, accepting our imperfections. I suggest that we look to one another with God's eyes and say, I love you with all your imperfections because I love the woman or the man that you are trying to be. And if we don't have that person to be a mirror in our lives, I suggest that we look to the mirror of a talit over our head or a prayer book in our hands and say to ourselves, I love the woman or man that you're trying to be because you're here. That's already trying. Because you opened the book, that's already trying to be. I want to read finally that poem one more time so that you go home today with that in mind. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I am hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in this place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. And finally, chapter 5. And my hope for this new year, for all of you and all of us, myself included, I walk down another street. L'Shana Tova. May it be a good year because we choose new paths.